Hi, I'm Adam Cohen, and this is my MI455 honors project on Unity's visual effects graph system. So, first off, why learn VFX? Okay, but why did I want to learn VFX? So, visual effects have an incredibly wide range of uses in games. They make things pop, and they increase clarity and readability when used well, and they're another way to make your game visually appealing without having to be great at classic art, like 2D art, 3D art. I'd like to show a clip I recorded of one of my favorite games of all time, Ori and the Will of the Wisps. In this short 30-second clip, how many uses of VFX can you spot? There's the effect of the portal, the dash, the that other ability, the fire, the wind going upwards, the bash, the launch, the whip, bash again, the spear, the explosion, all of those pickups. So clearly, there's a whole lot of usage of visual effects in that game, and was thinking about it a lot while doing this project. So let's get into it. Starting out with an overview, Visual Effects Graph is a system of extremely modular node-based logic to help you create visual effects in Unity. It requires some form of scriptable pipeline to work. I needed to start out my project in the Universal Render Pipeline and install the HD Render Pipeline package, since that adds some more options that are not in the default URP. When you create a new VFX graph, you'll get something like this. You see 4 main groups connected in a simple particle system, and it will give you this default effect here. These groupings control various things about the particle's behavior, and you can add nodes to the groups to control more aspects of them. At the top is the spawn group. This controls how the particles spawn, things like constant spawn rates, bursts, etc. And then next is the initialized particle group. This will control the particle's initial attributes as soon as they're spawned. The update particle group is similar to the update function in that it is called every frame, and it is used to control changes in a particle's behavior after it is spawned. For example, a particle may be spawned with 0 velocity, but then have its speed increased or its movement direction changed every frame during its life. Finally, the output particle group determines the properties of the actual particle that is spawned. I believe that most of what I learned while doing this project can really be boiled down to one sentence. VFX is just layering a bunch of stuff on top of each other to trick your computer into doing something cool. And the first effect I made, and a prime example of this, is the orb. It's made of 3 layered particle systems, and I'm gonna go into each of them real quick. Here's what the orb's VFX graph looks like. As you can see, there's 3 separate groups, each one being a different particle system. The first system is the beam, which is the central glow. This one's pretty basic. The most interesting things about it are that it is set to always face the camera, and that its size and color change slightly to create a subtle pulsing, as you can see down at the output particle quad down there. The trails are a little more interesting. Each particle is spawned with an initial position somewhere on a small internal sphere. In the update function, there is a conform to sphere node with a larger radius. This causes particles to spawn towards the center of the orb and then move towards the outside. The update function also calls a GPU event that spawns more particles that will create a trail behind it. And finally, there is a turbulence node that adds a bit of variance to the motion. Now, the last but not least is the aura. This one is actually made up of a ton of tiny particles. They're all spawned on an outer sphere and given a random initial velocity. And then this part is a bit tricky. VFX Graph has nodes that can create procedural noise, and using this, I created a sort of wave-like variance to both the conform to sphere and turbulence nodes. These together is what create the sort of gathering waves effect across the surface of the orb. And here's another look at it now that I've explained how it works. And as you can see, it is also able to change size just by using parameters that are exposed to the editor. Next up is this rock effect. It's also made of 3 systems, a little easier to see this time. There's the central rock, the ring of stones near its base, and the pebbles flying all around. The main new takeaways here are the mesh, using mesh particles rather than just what I was using before would be quads, and as well as using animation curves to control attributes over time. So here's the animation curve that I was talking about. This is connected to the set velocity node in the update particle group. So this controls the velocity of the central stone over time. As you can see it there, it starts with a high upwards velocity. Once it reaches its peak, it sort of jitters a bit and then flattens out for a while, and then it jitters more and before falling back into the ground. And in this way, it is using a visual curve is much easier to sort of understand than any complex equations. This one is my personal favorite. All 3 of these smoke effects were created from the same VFX graph by messing with some variables that are exposed to the editor. This is another example of layering things to create effects, but in a different way this time. The actual VFX graph for the smoke is fairly simple. Trust me, I promise. I know it doesn't look simple, but it is. All that's really happening here is setting initial values when spawning the particles. The real work is done by the attached shader graph that affects the mesh particle. So yeah, I guess I ended up learning shader graph a little bit for this too, which wasn't initially part of the plan, but hey. Shader graph is fairly similar to VFX graph in that it's a lot of node-based logic, but the important thing that's happening here is that another procedural noise pattern is being used to affect the alpha value of the texture. The Voronoi noise is sort of animated by using the time to affect the pattern's offset angle, and also alpha clipping is turned on, which removes all pixels below a given alpha value. So this creates a shifting sort of texture of differing alpha values across the surface of the mesh. From there, we just cause the alpha clip threshold to change over time in the VFX graph, and that results in this. The particle sort of the solid mesh of the particle sort of dissolves, creating this wispy kind of effect, and then a bunch of these particles wisping away together is what gets you this. Finally, I made this portal effect. It's made of 3 particle systems, 2 of which are mostly controlled by shader graphs, the central tendril column and the bottom swirl. The main new takeaways I got from making this one are the use of scrolling textures, as well as more ways of using procedural noise to distort textures and movement. So here are the main resources I used during this project. There's the Unity documentation manuals for both VFX Graph and Shader Graph, which both have a very helpful library of all the different nodes that are available. And then in terms of YouTube tutorials, I found this one YouTube channel called by Gabriel Aguiar. I might be mispronouncing that, I'm not entirely sure, but this person has a lot of Unity VFX tutorials, and in many of these, he would show a group of effects from a pack that he was putting on sale on the Unity Asset Store, and then would give a tutorial in the video on how to make one of them from the pack. And they were very well done tutorials and extremely helpful in just helping me visually see what's going on and how to get from point A to point B with these graphics. So in terms of difficulties I encountered during this project, first and foremost is that since this is an actively updated plugin, video tutorials and the like may be outdated very quickly in a lot of small ways. And this ate up a lot of my time, as while I was following some of the tutorials I mentioned earlier, I would be unable to recreate something that was done in the video and have to spend a lot of time figuring out why that is and how I can fix it in the version I was using. And additionally, I was going to this expecting to learn VFX graph. I did not expect that I would also have to learn shader graph, but ultimately I was able to do that with fairly little problem. So the main takeaways I got from this project is that using inspector exposed parameters is it can be used to make effects easy to use for designers, so you can just give them the variables that they can alter to change the actual look of the effect without changing how the effect works. It's very satisfying to see the effects in action once you've made them. It's really cool to see them all come together. I really learned that there's so much more to know. Like, as much as I went into here, I know there are so many different nodes that I never even got an opportunity to play with. There's so many different things that I know are possible that I just don't know how to do yet. This is something that I could spend a lot more time learning if I wanted to. And it is honestly just really fun to play around with it. And thank you.